What started as a Halloween episode for this channel turned into an essay that I eventually submitted for class as part of an ongoing discussion about the point of genre. So what you're watching right now was submitted in some version or another to my professor. In case you're wondering, I have not yet received a grade. So there's that. K-pop music videos are the kingpins of short-term but extreme satisfaction. They deliver hard and they deliver up front. The most successful of these videos are expensive, tonally distinct, well-produced meals, usually designed to pay off in the first watch, which is not to say they lack character or artistry. In fact, they are so laden with character that they stand apart from most other industries, and most non-K-pop fans will admit to some knowledge of the quote-unquote K-pop style or K-pop genre. At the same time that there is color and light and dance and dyed hair, there is also numerous examples of beautiful, complex film in K-pop. Whether that comes from production techniques like color scheme, temporal design, or camera work, or from more thematic angles, such as making every shot in your video resemble classic portraiture, or shooting straight for the Game of Thrones budget. To say that there is no K-pop genre is to ignore the very distinct ways other than language by which K-pop has separated itself stylistically. Genre, in the way we'll be using it today, is basically a tool of categorization, predominantly of media, that groups like things together according to social characteristics, such as iconography, symbology, sound structure, emotional impact, other conventions. Genres evolve and change over time in ways that are reflective of how media and social structures change over time, and media often mixes genre as a means of evolving or distinguishing a piece. And one of the things we're going to be discussing today is the way that we as audiences are naturally drawn to genre, among other tools, as a way of making sense of pieces. Genre is a tool that allows us to categorize things, to group them and organize them, slot them into appropriate spaces. Genre, functionally, is a way to label media so we can better understand it. So when a piece deliberately uses genre as a way of obscuring an audience's better understanding, it begs the question, why? In a discussion with director David Lynch, Martha P Nochimson asked him about Plato's chariot metaphor, which basically describes a natural organization of reason and direction in the grand scheme. In Plato's metaphor, the driver of the chariot is reason, and the horses he rules over are emotion and instinct, which from the Platonic point of view require the stewardship of reason. When I asked Lynch what he thought of that analogy, he responded, "What if no one is driving the chariot?" Eternally is, as of now, TXT's most substantial venture into what you might call an arthouse style. And I know that arthouse can sound really pretentious, but bear with me. Where a plot-driven project is about the what, character-driven is about the who, and theme-driven is about the why, art-driven is about the how. Eternally is aware of its audience at all times, and most K-pop music videos are aware of their audience in a servicing way, offering visual imagery and editing that is easy to digest. However, Eternally deliberately denies us what we want to see. Whether through space, shadow, perspective, depth of field, or reflection, there is always something out of reach. There are things we see that are unnoticed or hidden from the characters. There are things the characters see that we can't. Everyone in Eternally, audience, characters, everyone, is receiving different information. So I'm going to walk through the video and discuss some of the tools at play here and how they impact this approach to perspective. Where a lot of music videos follow a linear storyline, Eternally follows a web storyline, where multiple separate storylines branch out from a single starting point. After the 2-minute teaser, we open to this scene. This opening is the least fantastical section of the video, but it remains surreal nonetheless. The framing establishes one of the lasting motifs of the video, the manipulation of point of view. Each shot tells its information in non-straightforward ways, watching the scene through the reflection of a mirror, through a phone screen, out the window, or directly through a character's eyes. When you start to pay attention to how Eternally conveys its imagery, it asks you, whose perspective is this? The narrative is pretty simple. Subin has a bad dream, he wakes up during dance practice, he notices something odd in the hallway, but before he can investigate, the alarm goes off, sending everyone into panic. The reality of the world starts to fall apart and the characters are separated. The alarm is the central set piece of the video, and the convergence point of all the separate realities. In Subin's section, the alarm moves him to a secondary set piece, the hallway. This sequence derives its tone from sci-fi, the idea of transport, travel, and discovery. Its visual language is built on curiosity and destination. Each of the separate realities has its own specific set of genre tropes. Section 2's genre inspiration is romance. The camera stays mostly in either medium or full body, emotional staging versus worldly staging. This is the kind of framing where two characters' emotional feelings about each other start to become a part of their world. Fairy lights in the distance, nighttime festival outdoors, soft grass. The color palette is golden and purple and made of diffused highlights. Soft piano and laughter in the ambiance also tell us this isn't supposed to be creepy, it's supposed to be welcoming. The editing is relaxed, and the camera is always at a slow spin, like a dance. Everything about the visual language here tells us this is a memory. It's romanticized and familiar because it's already happened. Romance is built on internal desire and self-hindrance, something about our own past that conflicts with our ability to be honest in the present, wanting something enough that the pain of staying the same forces us to change how we behave, to relive something painful and face it, or to realize that what we thought we knew was never even about us at all. Effective romance often deals with isolation. Why is the past so difficult to deal with? Why is it so hard to move forward? Something sad happened here, and something hopeful is about to happen. The ultimate revelation changes what we understood about the past and ends in catharsis. Contrast this with Section 3, which is more dystopian and horror. This section is arguably the easiest to understand. Horror movies are the masters of simplicity. The grayscale color palette, the hints of fire tones, the emphasis on shadows and smoke. At each stage in the story, the camera makes a physical descent, visually dragging the audience farther down into hell. The sound is limited, almost mimicking a vacuum, the noticeable absence of sound in a setting that is visually incredibly loud. Handheld cameras from a first-person POV call back to classic found footage movies, the lighting and framing reference horror reveals as well as disaster movies. The sight of the dead Yeonjun brings in a combination of doppelganger horror and time travel fear. We wonder, is this a future Yeonjun or a parallel Yeonjun? What could possibly happen to him that could bring about what we're seeing on screen? Something terrible happened here, and something terrible is about to happen. Horror is a genre that centers around trauma, past trauma meeting current trauma. The most effective horror isn't randomly happening to a bunch of unrelated people who happen to buy a haunted house. It's connected to whatever these people are dealing with in their own lives. Horror imagery combined with apocalypse imagery is going to lead the audience to ask about the past. What happened that got us here? Everything about the visual language here tells us this is a future that hasn't happened yet. The ultimate revelation changes what we understand about the future and ends in fear. Section 4 starts with an obvious nod to science fiction. The spatial darkness surrounding a lone figure, the low-angled monolith framing, putting a human between panes of reflective glass, you know the works. It's worth noting that this section has more jump scares than any of the other sections of the video, and it has a few horror tropes of its own. Bonggyu's section also hides the least of the main character's own perspective from the audience. While much of what we see is blocked by the door frame, we as the audience are kept in the loop with what Bongyu sees. For the most part, Section 4 is built on seeing too much, witnessing something you were never supposed to see in the first place, but not having the context to understand it. Something shocking and transformative is happening right now. The ultimate revelation changes what we understand about the present and ends in threat. Section 5 is easily my favorite section of the video. It breaks all the rules of the previous sections and has my favorite visual language in the video. It also has such a creative approach to establishing conflict, so I want to take a moment to walk through that. Narrative videos and songs have a number of ways of establishing conflict. Some conflict is straightforward and easily externalized, cause and effect, which is the basis for breakup songs, or wanton action, which is the basis for romance songs. K-pop music videos are usually pretty linear about how conflict is established. They see it, we see it. We see what they want, we watch them go get it. We see what happens, we see them react. Section 5's conflict is established by deliberately restricting information from the audience. We have to watch Taehyun watching something else that we can't see. Things that we see are deliberately hidden from him. Similar to Section 4, conflict or tension centers around seeing something you didn't mean to see, but where Bongyu is eyewitness to an event as it happens, Taehyun stumbles across the aftermath of something horrifying. The type of tension Eternally uses the most isn't argument or attack, it's threat. The feeling we get when we know something is there that shouldn't be, but we don't yet know what it's going to do. I've noticed how K-pop music videos, whether happy or sad, are designed to give power to the audience. To feel energetic after watching a dance-heavy video, to feel stronger after a bad breakup, to feel sensually powerful. K-pop music videos typically don't disrupt the agency of the audience, and that's a staple of the genre. We like to feel in control, we like to feel that we know what's going on as it's happening. The videos are linear, time is within our control. The storylines have a beginning, middle, and end, verse, chorus, bridge, so we feel in control of the narrative flow. The concepts are creative, but they're not confusing, so we feel in control of our own understanding of it, even if viewers have different interpretations. Section 5 dramatizes my favorite element of Eternally. Eternally removes power from the audience. That's an unsettling tactic for a K-pop music video. The audience has no agency over the tone, the storyline, or even listening to the song. There are multiple different genres constantly changing the tone and the theme. The storyline is not linear. We repeat the same sequences several times, but each time slightly different. We don't know where in the 19-minute runtime the song is going to pop up. Power is not being delivered to us the way we expect. We have no control over what we do or do not see. Much like the characters, we're just forced to uncover things when the video decides the time is right. Wrestling power away from the audience isn't a normal tactic for K-pop music videos, but it is a very key trope of the horror genre. Let's talk about tone for a second. Taehyun's section has the best juxtaposition in the video. Up until now, the visual, auditory, and thematic elements of all the sections have been cohesive. What's happening on screen works together with what the visual language tells you to feel. Soft piano music and blurred backgrounds and golden colors for romance, dark shadows and descending movement and empty air for disaster. Section 5 is where the visual language and music cues start to contrast the actual events of the scene. Being left alone in a black void yet surrounded by wildflowers. Catching sight of something you can't quite make out, but not obscured by shadow, rather by distance and overlighting. Being unable to hear what he's yelling, seeing his distress, but instead hearing the soft hum of a ballad coming back in. Taehyun approaches the distant figure like a white girl in a horror movie going towards the scary noise, and yet purple petals are falling from above. Like earlier, the conflict being established here is a threat, and yet the scene is undeniably romantic. The tone is hard to pin down because what the visual language tells us to feel is opposite to what's happening on screen. When we reach the strange figure, it's once again obscured from us just to draw out the tension that much more. We only get to see Taehyun's reaction, and we see he's horrified. There are very few frames in K-pop that I love more than this one. It's very strange how beautiful this shot is. The wild vines and overgrowth, the crown of flowers growing over his head, the use of purple paint instead of blood. This is both the aftermath of a vicious attack and a strangely peaceful resting place, for all that Taehyun is visibly terrified of it. My sister made a great point about visual coding, how certain frames and shots in movies are meant to quickly convey ideas because you've seen them so many times before, visual shorthand. She pointed out that this shot right here is the classic stepping through blood shot. The video has already told us what we're about to discover, that this purple paint is actually blood. But because it's purple paint, the tone is still deceiving us. It's still telling us that everything is okay when it's clearly not. The holy lighting and power framing give this body all the importance in the room. It's godlike, it's the temple, it's the most powerful thing in the scene. It draws Taehyun out of his circle of comfort. Everything about this scene is a lie because it keeps telling us to be calm and be comfortable when the actual happenings are anything but. Finally, after all that buildup, we actually see a terrible thing that's happened, and yet flowers have begun to grow over the horror. Taehyun stumbles across a dead body that isn't tossed in a ditch, but rather sitting on a throne, becoming part of nature. Whether nature is good or evil, however, is left in question. Huening-Kai's section has several parallels to Subin's. Kai is the only other character to encounter the hallway. Kai is also visited by the ghost girl, encounters a Stargate sequence, and holy shit, Kai's pores are amazing. Section 6 is the finale of the dream sequences, so to speak. Finally, almost all the members are reunited as Kai begins to make his way across the dreamscape. Section 6 lasts exactly 2 minutes, and it has no outlying narrative. Rather, the audience is left to wonder what this separation between him and the members is meant to demonstrate. While there are multiple interpretations to this, I'm not here to tell you any of them. What I'd rather talk about is why this resolution feels oddly fitting for a video like Eternally, even though it doesn't answer everything on screen. This section hides nothing from the audience. After all that time spent obscuring our understanding, this is the first time since the beginning that the audience might feel some sense of restored power. The horror is over. Section 7 closes the frame of the video, it's bringing us back to the practice room. Everything seems to be back to normal and life is going to continue. But this final shot of the video once again opens it up to an entirely new perspective. So much of the video relies on who's watching who, and whether or not we have all the information. Was this a simulation to see how the boys would jump through hoops, or did their experiences in the dreamscape pull something into the world with them? We don't get to know. So what's the big point? Why did the journey matter? Why did the genres matter? Why, oh why, did any of it matter? And that's where I think the answer is. There is no why to a video like Eternally. Stylistically, genre in this case isn't a tool to further an ongoing question, it's the answer in and of itself. We're watching these moments reach culmination within themselves. When the boys finally reach each other, there is no big, what happened? It just happened. It just happened. That's what I love about TXT. We as a culture are so why-driven. When we look at videos, music, movies, whatever, we're trained and expected to ask, why? What was it all about? Camera angle and lighting, writing and dialogue, actors and character, what does it all mean? What's the real message? Eternally, as one video, doesn't really care about answering the questions it asks. It's more of an excuse to make things that make you feel. It doesn't want there to be some great cerebral reason, it's largely an emotional piece. All that we are ever taught to do with media is look for the whats and whys, but here the why is a distraction from the real purpose, which is the how. How does it make us feel? How do we react to it? There is no great answer, there's just what we feel. This is kind of what I think Lynch was talking about. What if no one is driving the chariot? What if there is no greater point? What if there is no reason or stewardship over emotion and instinct? Why is it painful to only have emotion and no giant metaphorical harness? Why is it painful for us as an audience for there to be no greater point, no big statement, no why? We're driven by a desire to see a higher purpose, that for some grand reason it was all worth it because the organization of the universe deemed it important or something. As an audience, it's painful to think that there is no categorization, no organization, no control, no agency. All we get is unexplainable happenings. That's honestly why I like projects like this, where there is no big gotcha moment, where the vague connective tissue between this video and another functions more like wrapping paper than machinery. The TXT universe is different from other K-pop universes because it's not about drawing all the lines together and connecting the big dots. It's about things that just happen, and the emotional impact on an audience that has absolutely no agency in what's going on. That is incredibly unique, particularly among an industry that is satisfaction-driven. Will there be some great answer? Will the symbology pay off in the end? Frankly, it doesn't matter. There is no one driving the chariot.